A very good evening, and thanks for clicking on to the Tuesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook for the 19th of March. We are seeing some very interesting things going on with the models, and we'll get right to it. Before we continue with the video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We could have a rather chilly upcoming Easter weekend and possibly beyond coming up. So we're going to look at the reasoning behind why this cool spell has been highlighted here on Mark Hogan Weather on YouTube for quite some time. It's all coinciding with the stratospheric warming that we've seen taking place in recent weeks, and also the Manjulian oscillation that is rotating has came out of the warm phases. We've had some very mild conditions across Europe, across North America, indicative of that phase 4 and 5, but it looks as if it's doing a rotation into favourable phases for cold, and it looks as if the modelling is now starting to kind of firm up on the ideas of that cooler, chillier theme. So we have that taste of spring in the air. I think today is actually the spring equinox, where now that the sun is going to the north of the equator, days are now longer than nights. And but I don't know about you, but how many times have we seen that the spring equinox, and we've seen the turn back a month or so. So we've kind of taken a step back towards more wintry type of weather. So this is the current situation within the stratosphere here. If I can get to the right chart, I might actually not have it uploaded, unfortunately. Yeah, here we go. So this is actually the lowest portion of the stratosphere, just at that layer, just above the tropopause, which is the boundary layer, and that separates the troposphere underneath with the stratosphere above. And you can see here all this blocking taking place here within the Arctic region, indicative of that warming within the stratosphere. It helps expand the stratosphere. In turn, it forces the troposphere underneath to contract. By contracting the troposphere within the Arctic, you're raising the heights at 500 millibars and also down towards the surface. What does that actually mean? It means that we start to see the pressure pattern change and the cold air getting forced into the middle altitude pattern. Now, recent times it's been very, very mild. Eastern United States, Eastern Canada, Western Europe, we have seen a very, very mild overall pattern. And the Manjulian oscillation rotated through a very strong phase 4 and 5. Now, we've seen that taking place in December, we've seen it taking place in January, and we're seeing it taking place now. Now, what's key to all this is the fact that the last rotation out of the warm phases into the cold phases did not respond to a cold pattern in either the United States or in Western Europe. And I think the reason behind that, and it's been highlighted for quite some time here on the channel, that I think the El Nino took over this teleconnection, this climate driver, and essentially shut down the influence of the Manjulian oscillation due to the atmospheric response from ocean to atmosphere within the central and eastern equatorial Pacific. I think that overrid the pattern. Is that the right word? Override, whatever is the right terminology. But you can see that is still in a very amplified state now. By amplified, I mean that it is well away from the inner circle, and the further this line is away from the inner circle, the more influential the MJO or the Manjulian oscillation is. Just a quick summary: what is the Manjulian oscillation? It is a pulse of enhanced convection that cycles around the equatorial belt of the planet. So around the equator, we have this pulse of enhanced thunderstorm activity, but equally on the other side of the planet, we have a suppressed state of the Manjulian oscillation, which means we've got enhanced sinking of air. And quite often, where that sinking takes place, that is often where you have drought and heat. And we've seen a lot of heat conditions across parts of Indonesia and southeastern Australia, and I think that has been a byproduct of the negative Indian Ocean dipole, and also the MJO signal, suppressed state of the MJO over the maritime continent, over Indonesia, over Southeast Australia, Southeast Asia, should I say, and that has been enhancing unusually hot conditions week after week, month after month, in places such as Thailand, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. We've seen outstanding record breaking warmth in this region of the world, and I think a lot of the reason is that the MJO has been in an enhanced state on other parts of the hemisphere. But we are seeing the MJO, so we did see the strong phase 4 and 5 of the MJO, and that has likely helped kind of reduce some of that heat in parts of northern Australia, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, enhancing thunderstorms, and increase in rainfall, for example, in this region of the planet. But now, as it's rotating through the Western Pacific and towards the African continent, this is indicative of colder phases. This represents more blocking to the north of the UK, over the Arctic, over Greenland, and over the North Atlantic as well. So let's have a look at the models and see what the models are indicating in terms of this response. So this is the upcoming 5-day period of the GFS ensemble. Now, I did see in yesterday's video, unfortunately, one person had to get their binoculars out to see some of the charts. Now listen, I have tried to blow up some of these charts. For example, this chart here of weather charts, I can't actually blow up any further. So maybe I could hit something on the screen that makes it the full size of the screen. I don't know, but I did see one person saying that they unfortunately needed to get their binoculars out to see some of these charts. I apologize for the fact that if you can't see these charts particularly well, this is as big as I can get this, and I'm assuming the person is referring to this particular chart here, that they can't see it properly, especially if you're looking on a phone or whatever. I will try my best to kind of tweak things to try, and I'm working pretty hard at the moment to try and improve things. And I do listen to people's comments. I do listen to people's constructive criticism, and I try to improve things as best I can. But that is one aspect that I don't know if I can get this any bigger than it already is. So I do apologize if it's difficult to see some of these charts, like I've already said. Anyway, back to the ensemble of the GFS. You can see this is the upcoming 5-day period. So this is the period between the 19th and the 24th of March. Warmer than average across Europe and also across the UK and Ireland. Not as warm as it has been, but it is still milder than average for the upcoming 5-day period. But look at this here. This is the 6 to 10 day of the GFS ensemble, and we have the trend to colder than average. Nothing extreme, nothing out of the ordinary. This is actually quite a common thing to see, even during mild winters, mild springs even. You tend to have a spell of colder than average conditions at some point. And I've found, I would be curious to know your comments actually on this one, but I've found quite often after you pass the equinox or the equilux or whatever, there does tend to be a cold spell at some point after that takes place. And the modelling is certainly firming up in this. Now, if we look at the CFSV2, it isn't really showing anything particularly cold. In fact, it stays warm than average. This is the upcoming 7-day period. You can see here, this is the following 7 days. So this is the period between the 26th and the 2nd of April. Takes us through the Easter weekend, and it's not really particularly cold at all. And then look at that, it actually warms things back up. Now, this is classic of the CFSV2, may I add, but nonetheless, it's interesting the difference between the GFS and the CFS. Now, this is the latest GFS ensemble for the Arctic Oscillation. We're going back towards neutral, but you notice here that we have the trend back towards negative in terms of the Arctic Oscillation. The North Atlantic Oscillation is not overly negative, if you notice here, which is quite interesting as well. Let's have a look and see what the latest GFS operational is indicating for the 500 millibar geopotential heights. So this is the period here and now, and you can see we've got the negative just to the west of the UK and Ireland here. We've got the positive over the continent. Therefore, we have this mild south to southwesterly airflow. Now, as we play through the loop, you notice what takes place. Now, remember, we've just went through phases 6 of the MJO, and there's always a lag between the warm phases and the cold phases. You have to factor that into the equation. Similar to the stratospheric warming situation, it's typically 2 to 2.5 weeks after the warming takes place, after the wind reversal within the surrounding the polar vortex. It's usually a lag time of about 2 to 2.5 weeks. Then we see the response. Similar idea to the MJO, but you possibly get a quicker response time with the MJO as opposed to the stratosphere, because when you think about it, what goes on within the stratosphere, it takes time for that energy to propagate, to work its way down through the column and into the troposphere. Remember, you're talking about a response from one layer of the atmosphere into another, and it doesn't always take place, may I add. The convective thunderstorm activity surrounding the equatorial region, I think that tends to have a little bit of a quicker response to the mid and high latitude pattern. So phase 6 often represents higher pressure over the UK and Ireland. And you notice here, by the time we reach 12 o'clock on Thursday, we've got above average heights across the majority of the continent, with arguably the core of highest pressure over the UK and Ireland. Now, as we continue to play through this loop, you notice here that we start to see some changes taking place. Those heights start to rise further north. We're also seeing deepening, undercutting of lower pressure from the central North Atlantic down towards the southwest of Europe here. And by that happening, by forcing this energy to the south of the UK, you're then raising the heights to the north. And you see here, by the time we reach Thursday, 20th of March, in the run up to the Easter weekend, you're starting to see quite a lot of deep negatives here forced to the south underneath the UK and Ireland into southern Europe, likely bringing some quite wet weather here across Iberia, France, into Central Europe here. We've also got a trough just to the east of the British Isles as well. But this orientation of the high, quite strong over Greenland and Iceland. We've got the negative over Scandinavia. You've got a northerly wind in response to that situation, that overall setup. And then as we move towards the Easter weekend itself, you've got the negative here, centred to the south of the UK, but incorporating the UK and Ireland. Got a lot of high pressure over Central and Eastern Europe, up into Scandinavia, and right the way across to Greenland here. Now, modelling is still going to go back and forth. We're still a week and a half away from this time period, but nonetheless, in response to the stratosphere, in response to the Mandela oscillation, these models are making sense. This is what you would typically expect to see taking place given the overall parameters in place here. So I'm showing you, like I've said already, right the way through the winter, even last summer, I'm giving you the evidence to back up what I'm saying. This is not wish casting. This is not me just going by each individual model run and saying this is going to happen or that's going to happen. I'm giving you the reason why the change is likely to take place. Exactly how cold we get, still open to question here, but it would not surprise me if we get something rather chilly towards the end of this month, beginning of April. And that's been highlighted, by the way, for the last couple of weeks here on the channel. Looking at the overview chart here of the same model run, and let's go back to the here now, and you can see what we're dealing with, what we're talking about here. So this is the current situation. We've got an area of low pressure that is going to spread rain up into Ireland and the UK. Not so much in the way of wind, as you can see here. We've not got really any squeeze in the isobars or anything. They're all spaced out quite a bit. So misty, murky, damp conditions. A lot of cloud cover associated with this type of situation as we move into the day tomorrow here. Then as we continue to play through the loop, there's that area of high pressure, elongated generally from the Azores all the way up into northwestern Russia. We've got a very deep area of low pressure, may I add, on the northeastern shore of Iceland. If you notice, associated frontal system with that during the course of Thursday is going to bring a spell of rain, possibly some hill snow, but also windier conditions across particularly northern portions of the British Isles here. You can see that taking place. And then as we move towards the end of the week, as that system then clears to the east-northeast, or east-southeast, should I say, we're introducing something colder. Hill snow, chilly northwesterly wind, probably quite a strong wind at that, and feeling distinctly cooler than what we've seen so far this week. And then as we continue to play through the loop, you notice here that we've got that system then kind of skirting the eastern side of northeastern UK, and we're in a bit of a no man's land here. And notice here the heights are starting to rise to the north of the British Isles here. And if we look at the 850 temperatures, you can see that we've got an introduction of something colder coming in from the north here. So there's your colder air, a lot of cold air to the north. Remember that we've got competing aspects to consider, strengthening sun at this time of the year, and also the cold air mass itself. But that is a fairly chilly air mass as we move into the final days of March, and it looks as if it's going to maintain itself. So yeah, interesting things coming up. Then notice here that the GFS is actually trying to pull something milder coming up from the south as well. So like I said, nothing is clear cut, nothing is written in stone, but nonetheless you can see the overall pattern. There's no point in throwing up the temperature potential and also snow, because it's just too far out and there's going to be back and forth here and there. But nonetheless, interesting things to look at least. Like, share, and subscribe. You know the drill. And I'll hopefully be back to look at more details in tomorrow's video and the videos beyond that as well. So enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you all being well tomorrow with more. Bye for now.